Welcome back to this week's Parent Parsha series, Parashat Acharei Mot-Kedoshim. I wanted to share an idea that I heard actually a few weeks ago, and I was so taken by it, and I actually wanted to share it in the week that I heard it, but I held onto it and waited until we were talking about the Kohanim, which is what we are up to in this week's Parsha. We're talking about the Kohanim during the avodah of the Yom Kippur prayer service. And for those of you who are on the Daf Yomi cycle, you might be familiar, hopefully, that we started Gemara Yuma. And the Gemara in Yuma is really, at least up until now, talking all about, there are other aspects to it, but it's centralized and focused on the Kohen Gadol and preparing for the avodah that he is going to do, the service that he is going to do on the holiest day of the year, on Yom Kippur. And one of the first things that we're introduced to is the halacha, is the idea that a Kohen Gadol has to separate himself from his family, from his home for 7 days in order to ready himself. And the Gemara goes through a back and forth. What does it mean? What is he separating himself from? Where is he going to? What is the purpose of this separation? But one of the pieces that Rabbi Rosner pointed out in his Daf Yomi shir that I was so taken by is he points out that the mandate that the Kohen Gadol has, right, one of the precursors or the requirements of the Kohen Gadol is that he be married. And in fact, there's actually a little bit of a strange discussion about if his wife would die and having basically like keeping a backup wife because it's so critical that he be married when he's doing the Yom Kippur service. And the idea, especially today in our community, we're talking a lot about this idea of people who feel like they're not included in the community because they don't necessarily have a spouse. And so I think that is its own entity and its own conversation. But I do think that one point that Roer Bendheim points out is he asked the question, like, why is it so critical? That the Kohen Gadol be somebody who has a partner, who's engaged in a married relationship. And he points out that a person who is in that type of relationship understands at its core the experience of giving and being able to take care of another person and sharing with another person. And the Kohen Gadol has this huge responsibility of taking on all of the needs of the Jewish people and being able to give to them and pay attention to their needs and ask for forgiveness for them and for what they're going through. And that comes from being in a relationship with another person. And it really made me think about the fact that we've spent a fair amount of time in the last couple of months really focusing on parenting and how people parent. And I wanted to take a step back and just think about the value and the critical important piece, which is that in order for us to be good parents, we also have to be good partners. And sometimes being a good partner is very easy, and sometimes being a good partner can be challenging. We know that among the more famous marriage therapists and marriage psychologists is John Gottman, and he talks about a lot of different ideas around what makes a marriage successful. He breaks them down into categories. He's most famous for this idea of the 4 horsemen. I encourage everybody to read his books. They're amazing, they're thoughtful, they're critical, they're insightful. And so one of his things that he talks about is this notion of emotional bids, that we are attuned to when somebody, our partner, says something to us in an emotional way, and we actually look at them and we respond to them in a meaningful way, which allows them to feel heard, it allows them to feel loved. And when we do that, we're creating actually an environment, this is what I'm saying, is that we're actually creating an environment in our home where people are attending and listening to what other people are saying, and they're responding to them in a deep, emotionally connected, meaningful way. And I also think about it not just in the way in which we respond emotionally, or when someone says something, we actually take it in, we respond, we think about it, which then leads itself to other curiosity and other platforms for connecting. But I also think about it from the notion of this giving. One of the things that we think about is, and is talked about a lot today is this notion of self-care, right? That like I take a moment for myself to make myself feel like a person, to take care of myself, to feel good about who I am. And one of the things that I think we oftentimes think about is the notion that like I'm responsible for all my self-care, which I think is important. The ability to know what you need, the ability to be able to articulate, hey, I just need 10 minutes to regroup. I need X amount of time to decompress, to read a book, to get my nails done, to go for a run, to build something, whatever it is that's your self-care moment. But I also happen to think that when we're in a deep, meaningful relationship, when we have this positive emotional bids going back and forth, I also think that our partners are able to actually have physical bids in the sense of if I know that I'm making myself a cup of coffee and I'm not just making myself a cup of coffee, I'm automatically making a cup of coffee for my spouse, then that person also feels very taken care of. When we're really asking ourselves, what does my partner need in this moment? And not just emotionally, but like, do they need something? Are they hungry? I know I'm going out to get something. Can I get it for them? I think that when we're being mindful about, and really actually another one of John Gottman's theories, like taking our kind of building a relationship map and thinking about what our partner is struggling with, what our partner needs in this moment. How can we help be part of that solution? How can we help be part of what they need? It's the small things done often that make the difference. It's not the big things. The big things are nice, the big piece of gift, the big piece of, whatever that big moment is. But more often than not, it's the small things that make us feel like the person is in it with us, and really thinking about the ways in which we build and give in our marriage. And I think that one of the beautiful pieces around the Kohen Gadol is he is the person that goes into the holiest place. He's supposed to be the example of relationship with Hashem, the most connected, the holiest person. And that person also has to have a type of relationship with their partner that exemplifies giving, both giving emotionally, both giving physically, and thinking about it, that is the sustainability of both the large bayit of Am Yisrael and the Beit HaMikdash, but also in our own little bayit, in our own little homes, that the best way that we can be a positive parent is also to have a relationship that is attending to our emotional needs and attending to our physical needs, and really being able to build upon that. So I challenge each of us to really pause and look and think. I think in this world where people are more anxious, particularly as people are trying to figure out what this new stage of COVID is, people tend to kind of dig in what they need, what they're not getting, and reminding ourselves that we want to be people who are givers, and that we want to look to our spouses and be asking ourselves what we can give to them, and the other spouse also thinking, what can I give to them? And then in that way, when everybody's giving to somebody else, we also get our own needs met. So it's really, and we're also setting an example for the people who are surrounding us about how to engage with other people, how to engage in deep, meaningful relationships, the messages we're sending to our children about relationships, and really trying to think about the critical point of emotional bids, physical bids, and putting in so much energy into building and giving in our marriage the same way that we do in all aspects of our life. Parsha treats. Okay, so I think you could do a lot of things in this week's Parsha. So first of all, I actually happen to love these candies. Not everybody does, but I think in this week's Parsha, there's the mitzvah of Orla in terms of like how long you have to wait for fruit to grow on a tree before it is allowed to eat. There's also a discussion of Pei and Shecha. You have to leave the corners of your field. So there's a lot of fruit, and these are candies that are fruit. So to me, that would be a very ideal purchase. It's already in my grocery cart. So I definitely recommend that's an easy one, which lends me into the next discussion. So as I was busy this morning doing something else, I was like, oh yeah, fruit, pie, excellent. And I made a strawberry pie. It turns out that strawberries, as was pointed out to me while I was on this call, which is a plug. Everybody go register for the Nishmat Health and Halacha conference, because I was actually on a call about it this morning. And they pointed out to me, strawberries grow on bushes, to which I then said, oh no, but we can use our mistake and roll with it. That is a tree that does not require the halachot of Orla. So we may make another pie, we may not, but I think it's also just good, like, okay, like even if you just go the candy route, which one of these would you have to eat? Which one of these wouldn't you have to eat? What happens in America? What happens in Israel? as I was trying to assess the level of my mistake, I was talking to somebody in Israel. I was like, "What's the story with Orla?" She's like, "Oh, I don't know what the halachot are in Eretz Yisrael versus in Chutz La'aretz." And so that's an interesting discussion to be had. There is also in this week's parsha when the Kohen Gadol puts his hands on the goat to atone for the sins of the Jewish people. So that is you could totally do some sugar cookie hands. You could also do hands on a paper, just like a piece of paper on a Friday, and have the kids trace them. If you really wanted to go down, get a little bit early preparation for Yom Kippur, you could write something on there that maybe the kids feel like they would like to ask for forgiveness for. Maybe they didn't talk so nicely to one of their siblings. Maybe they got frustrated, and I don't know. You can come up with whatever it is that maybe they could have done that they might have wanted to do differently. That could also be something that they share at the Shabbos table. So I think that's an excellent thing. There are lots of different things you could do for goats. These goats look extremely elaborate, to be perfectly honest. In fact, every goat I have seen is a little bit elaborate. So I actually have no idea if that's actually going to make it to my table this Shabbat. It may not, but I encourage anybody else to give it a try. It looks like it's some fondant, and I don't know what else, maybe some black licorice, which I happen to like, but I'm not sure if I can make it look like that, but that's an option for people. The other thing is the Kohen Gadol repeatedly actually dips his clothing and himself in the mikveh, which is a body of water. So I actually think you could make little mikvaot. You could use cookie, like there's molds that you can actually, if you happen to have one of the molds, excellent. You could do cookies, you could do brownies, and then you could even fill it with frosting that's blue. Or you could also just take a muffin tin, melt some chocolate, or put brownie batter in there. Always Duncan Hines, Duncan Hines, Duncan Hines as a good option. And then take a muffin tin and kind of push it down, and it actually creates its own rim. And if you bake it like that, then afterwards you can take it out and you'll have some type of like basically like a shell. And so that's definitely an option as well. So those are the options I have for Acharei Mot-Kedoshim. Again, you can always go back and look and see some of the other things we did, because we have like the mizbeach and we have the throwing of the blood. You could do like a haza'ah thing. I'm not exactly recommending everybody throwing things at each other, but that's an option also. And so I look forward to hearing what you do in your house, and I will definitely share what I do in my house. Everybody should have a good Shabbat and an end of a good week.